On February 13, 2025, President Donald Trump announced a significant new trade policy initiative introducing a plan for 25% reciprocal tariffs on imports from countries that impose higher tariffs on U.S. goods. This announcement, made during a signing ceremony in the Oval Office, aims to rectify perceived trade imbalances and create what Trump described as a level playing field for American manufacturers. Key components of the plan. 1. Presidential Memorandum. Trump signed a memorandum instructing his administration to develop detailed tariff plans. This includes analyzing existing international tariffs, exchange rates, and trade balances with a deadline of 180 days for a comprehensive report. 2. Target countries. While the specific 15 countries targeted were not disclosed, Trump indicated that the European Union, India, Vietnam, and Thailand are under scrutiny for their relatively higher tariffs on U.S. imports compared to the lower tariffs the U.S. applies to their goods. 3. Fairness in trade. The president underscored his commitment to fair trade practices, stating, "If you build your product in the United States, there are no tariffs." He criticized the historical trade arrangements as being heavily skewed in favor of foreign nations, providing examples such as Brazil's 18% tariff on ethanol versus the U.S.'s 2.5%. For economic rationale, Trump argued that the new tariffs would restore fairness, improve competitiveness, reduce the trade deficit, and bolster national security. He emphasized that the U.S. has long been at a disadvantage due to non-reciprocal trade practices. Economic implications. Potential for trade war. Analysts have raised alarms that these tariffs could lead to retaliatory measures from affected countries, potentially escalating into a trade war that could increase inflation and disrupt economic growth. The complexities of international trade relationships mean that retaliatory tariffs could harm U.S. exporters and consumers. Public sentiment. Polls reveal that a significant portion of the American public is skeptical about the effectiveness of tariffs. Only 24% believe that the new tariffs will positively impact the economy, with a majority expressing concern about rising costs of goods. Preceding tariffs. The announcement follows a series of previous tariff actions, including a 25% import tax on steel and aluminum and a 10% tariff on Chinese imports. These earlier measures have already contributed to economic uncertainty. Media coverage and perspectives. BBC reporting. The BBC highlighted the implications of the tariffs on global trade talks and the administration's concerns about European policies. It noted Trump's goal of boosting manufacturing in the U.S. while framing the tariffs as a necessary response to unfair practices. Associated Press analysis. The AP focused on the potential economic risks, emphasizing that higher tariffs would likely increase costs for American consumers and businesses. It suggested that Trump's approach could backfire if inflation rises significantly, which could erode consumer purchasing power. White House fact sheet. The White House presented a more optimistic view, portraying the tariffs as a corrective measure against long-standing trade imbalances. The administration provided examples of unfair tariff practices and argued that the new policy would ultimately benefit American workers and the economy. Timeline of events. February 13, 2025, Trump signs the Presidential Memorandum for reciprocal tariffs. March 2025, anticipated discussions with targeted countries, with a detailed tariff plan expected in the following months. Future tariffs. Trump has indicated that he may impose additional tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, suggesting further escalation of trade tensions. Conclusion. Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs marks a significant shift in U.S. trade policy aimed at addressing perceived inequities in international trade practices. While the initiative seeks to bolster American manufacturing and reduce the trade deficit, it faces potential backlash from both domestic and international fronts. The long-term economic implications remain uncertain. As the U.S. navigates the complexities of global trade relationships and the risks of retaliatory measures from affected countries. As discussions unfold over the next several months, the outcome of this initiative could reshape U.S. trade relations and impact the broader economy.
Counterintuitive information.
1. Tariffs as economic equalizers. While Trump presents the reciprocal tariffs as a method for leveling the playing field, historical evidence suggests that tariffs often lead to increased consumer prices and may not necessarily result in the intended economic benefits for domestic manufacturers. This raises the question of whether tariffs can genuinely serve as a fair mechanism in trade, contradicting the notion that they promote equity. 2. Public sentiment versus policy. Despite Trump's framing of tariffs as a means to protect American jobs and restore fairness, public opinion is largely skeptical. Polls indicate that only a small fraction of the population believes tariffs will positively impact the economy. This discrepancy between policy intentions and public perception highlights a potential disconnect that could undermine the effectiveness of such tariffs. 3. Potential for trade war. The expectation that imposing tariffs will foster negotiations and improve trade relations is counterintuitive. History shows that tariffs often provoke retaliatory actions from affected countries, escalating tensions and leading to trade wars, which can have detrimental effects on the global economy and domestic markets. For economic growth versus inflation concerns, Trump asserts that the tariffs will boost manufacturing and create jobs in the long term, even if prices rise temporarily. However, analysts warn that the immediate consequence of increased tariffs could be higher inflation and reduced economic growth, contradicting the administration's optimistic outlook on economic performance. 5. Misunderstanding global trade dynamics. Experts argue that Trump's approach reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how global trade works. Rather than fostering fairness, the proposed tariffs may inadvertently harm U.S. consumers and businesses by raising costs and disrupting established trade relationships, which challenges the narrative that tariffs are a straightforward solution to trade imbalances. 6. Complicated nature of tariff calculation. The plan's complexity, involving various factors like exchange rates and existing tariffs of other countries, points to a counterintuitive reality that creating a fair tariff system may be more difficult and convoluted than expected, potentially leading to unintended consequences and further complicating trade relations. 7. Long-term versus short-term effects. Trump's assertion that tariffs will lead to job creation in the long run contrasts with the immediate economic pressures tariffs may exert on consumers. This raises the question of whether short-term pain can truly translate into long-term gain, an assumption that is often challenged by economic theories on trade. 8. Tariffs as a double-edged sword. The intended use of tariffs to challenge unfair practices abroad could backfire. As Trump's own tariffs are layered on top of reciprocal tariffs, it complicates the intended fairness, suggesting that the strategy may create more barriers than it resolves, undermining its own goals of promoting equitable trade. The announcement of President Trump's plan for 25% reciprocal tariffs on imports from 15 key trading partners is laden with implications that require deeper analysis beyond the surface-level discussions surrounding trade fairness and economic growth. While many reports focus on the potential for trade wars, inflation, and public skepticism, several key elements within the plan and its context are significant yet often overlooked. 1. Targeted countries and the nature of trade imbalances. While the memo does not explicitly name the 15 countries targeted, the focus on nations like the European Union, India, Vietnam, and Thailand is critical. These countries are not only major trading partners but also have intricate economic relationships with the U.S. Overlooking the specific dynamics of these relationships can lead to misunderstandings about the potential fallout. Countries like India and Vietnam have rapidly growing economies that rely heavily on U.S. imports, and they may retaliate with their own tariffs. The potential for these nations to respond could escalate tensions and lead to a broader economic confrontation. The significance of the targeted countries lies in the fact that they are integral to supply chains that many American businesses depend on. Disruption in these relationships can have cascading effects on U.S. industry and employment, especially in sectors like technology and manufacturing. 2. The role of value-added taxes (VAT) in digital service taxes. Trump's plan to factor in non-tariff barriers. such as value-added taxes, VAT, and digital service taxes imposed by other countries, is a significant but often misunderstood aspect of the proposal. These taxes disproportionately affect American companies, particularly in tech and services, which are key drivers of the U.S. economy. For instance, the inclusion of digital service taxes in tariff calculations signals an attempt to address a broader issue of tax equity in international trade. This might lead to reciprocal actions that could further complicate international business operations and tax compliance for U.S. firms operating abroad. Ignoring this aspect could diminish understanding of the long-term implications for U.S. tech companies and their market competitiveness globally. 3. Public sentiment and economic impact. While public skepticism regarding the effectiveness of tariffs is highlighted, the nuances of public sentiment reveal an important layer. The poll indicating that only 24% believe tariffs will help the economy suggests a disconnect between political rhetoric and public understanding of economic policy. Importantly, concerns about rising costs and inflation reflect a broader anxiety about economic stability. If consumers face increased prices due to tariffs, it could lead to decreased spending, thereby undermining the very economic growth the administration seeks to achieve. Overlooking the potential backlash from voters who are directly affected by price increases could be detrimental to Trump's political capital, especially as the country moves toward the next election cycle. 4. Historical context of trade relations. The historical context in which Trump's tariffs are set must not be overlooked. The U.S. has long championed free trade, and these tariffs represent a significant shift in policy. This evolution raises questions about the future of multilateral trade agreements that foster global economic cooperation. The global reaction to Trump's previous trade policies during his first term, including the withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership (TPP), provides a cautionary tale about the long-term consequences of unilateral trade measures. The significance of this historical backdrop lies in its potential to reshape global trade norms. If countries respond by adopting protectionist measures, the resulting fragmentation could lead to a less stable global economy, which in turn could have profound implications for U.S. businesses reliant on international markets. 5. Economic security versus national security. Trump's argument for tariffs as a tool for national security, particularly in relation to steel and aluminum imports, often overshadows the economic implications. The conflation of economic and national security raises important questions about the justification for tariffs. The rhetoric surrounding national security can be politically advantageous, but it risks oversimplifying complex economic issues. The emphasis on national security may lead to policies that prioritize short-term political gains at the expense of long-term economic stability. This duality of security needs, economic versus national, illustrates the significant trade-offs that policymakers must navigate. 6. Potential for trade negotiations. The administration's expectation that these tariffs could kickstart negotiations for fairer trade practices is also significant. However, this approach may overlook the realities of international diplomacy, where economic measures can lead to entrenched positions rather than constructive dialogue. Historically, trade negotiations require a delicate balance of concessions and cooperation. The unilateral imposition of tariffs could alienate potential partners and lead to a breakdown in negotiations. Understanding the delicate interplay between tariffs and diplomacy is critical for predicting the long-term effects of this policy. Conclusion. In summary, the implications of Trump's comprehensive tariff plan extend far beyond the immediate economic considerations of trade imbalances and price increases. The targeted countries, the role of non-tariff barriers, public sentiment, historical context, the intersection of economic and national security, and the potential for trade negotiations are all crucial factors that can shape the outcome of this policy initiative. Failing to appreciate these nuanced dimensions could result in a misunderstanding of the broader consequences for U.S. trade relations and economic stability. The impact of these tariffs will likely reverberate through various sectors of the economy. affecting everything from consumer prices to international relations and the foundational principles of global trade. 1. Economic implications and potential trade wars. Trump's plan to impose 25% reciprocal tariffs on imports from countries with higher tariffs on U.S. goods aims to address long-standing trade imbalances. However, analysts warn that this could provoke retaliatory measures from other countries, potentially leading to a broader trade war. The risks include increased inflation and disruption to economic growth, which could affect American consumers through rising prices. The announcement follows previous tariff-related actions contributing to uncertainty in financial markets and among consumers. 2. Public sentiment and polling data. Despite Trump's assertions of fairness and economic benefit from the new tariffs, public sentiment appears skeptical. Polls indicate that only 24% of Americans believe tariffs will positively impact the economy, with concerns about rising costs dominating discussions. This skepticism spans political lines, revealing a significant disconnect between the administration's optimistic messaging and public perception regarding the effectiveness and consequences of tariffs. 3. Differences in perspective among sources. Coverage of the tariff announcement varies significantly among sources. The BBC emphasizes the details of implementation and potential for global trade talks, while the Associated Press highlights the economic risks and consumer burdens associated with increased tariffs. In contrast, the White House's framing presents a more optimistic narrative focusing on fairness and competitiveness. This divergence underscores the complexity of trade policy discussions and the varying interpretations of economic data and political motivations. For historical context in trade practices, the plan is set against a backdrop of historical grievances regarding international trade practices, particularly non-reciprocal tariffs and barriers faced by U.S. exporters. Trump cites specific examples of countries imposing higher tariffs on U.S. goods, illustrating the imbalance in trade relationships. The historical context of trade deficits, the impact of previous tariffs, and the shifting dynamics in international trade discussions are crucial for understanding the potential implications of Trump's new tariff strategy. The ongoing dialogue about trade fairness reflects broader concerns over the U.S.'s competitive position in the global economy and the effectiveness of unilateral trade policies. 1. Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act 1930. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was a significant piece of legislation in the United States that raised tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. Intended to protect American industries during the Great Depression, it led to retaliatory tariffs from other countries and contributed to a steep decline in international trade. The act has been widely criticized for exacerbating the economic downturn and is often cited as a cautionary tale regarding protectionist trade policies. 2. The trade wars of 2018. During his presidency, Donald Trump initiated a series of tariff increases against various countries, most notably China, in an effort to combat trade imbalances and protect American industries. These tariffs, which included a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum, sparked a trade war characterized by retaliatory tariffs from China and other nations. The ongoing conflict affected global supply chains, increased costs for U.S. consumers, and led to significant economic uncertainty. 3. The U.S.-Japan trade negotiations 1980s. In the 1980s, the United States faced a significant trade deficit with Japan, which led to a series of trade negotiations aimed at addressing perceived unfair trade practices. The U.S. imposed tariffs on certain Japanese imports, particularly in the auto industry, while Japan agreed to voluntary export restraints. This period highlighted the complexities of trade relations and the balancing act between protectionism and fostering international cooperation. Similar to the dynamics observed in Trump's recent tariff announcements. Future outlook: predictions for the impact of Trump's reciprocal tariff plan. As President Donald Trump's administration rolls out its comprehensive plan for 25% reciprocal tariffs on 15 key trading partners, the economic and geopolitical landscape is poised for significant transformation. While the immediate effects of this policy will unfold over the coming months, several long-term predictions can be made regarding its implications. 1. Heightened trade tensions and retaliation. One of the most immediate outcomes of the tariff implementation is likely to be a surge in trade tensions. Countries targeted by these tariffs may retaliate with their own tariffs on U.S. goods. This could lead to a protracted trade war reminiscent of the U.S.-China trade tensions seen in previous years. Countries such as India, the European Union, and Canada have already indicated they may respond to U.S. tariff increases, potentially escalating into broader retaliatory measures that could affect various sectors including agriculture, technology, and automotive industries. 2. Inflationary pressures on U.S. consumers. The implementation of reciprocal tariffs is expected to result in increased prices for imported goods. As companies face higher costs due to tariffs, these expenses will likely be passed on to consumers through higher retail prices. This inflationary pressure could dampen consumer spending and negatively impact the overall economy, potentially leading to slower economic growth. Public sentiment has already indicated skepticism regarding the effectiveness of tariffs in boosting the economy, and rising prices may exacerbate this skepticism. 3. Shifts in global supply chains. In response to the new tariffs, companies may seek to adapt their supply chains to mitigate the financial impact. This could involve moving production facilities to countries that are not subject to tariffs or increasing domestic manufacturing in the U.S. The quest for more resilient supply chains may lead to increased investment in automation and technology to reduce reliance on foreign labor. However, the transition may take time and companies could experience disruptions during this adjustment period. 4. Impact on U.S. manufacturing and employment. While Trump's plan is framed as a means to bolster American manufacturing, the reality could be more complex. If tariffs lead to retaliatory actions and increased costs of goods, manufacturers may face challenges that could hinder growth and job creation. The manufacturing sector could see short-term benefits due to increased domestic production. But long-term sustainability will depend on the ability to remain competitive in a global market. If inflation leads to reduced consumer demand, manufacturers may struggle to maintain employment levels. 5. Political repercussions and public sentiment. The political landscape is likely to be influenced by the outcomes of the tariff policy. If the anticipated benefits do not materialize, or if the public perceives a significant negative impact on their cost of living, Trump's administration may face backlash from voters. Given the mixed public sentiment regarding tariffs, the administration will need to effectively communicate the benefits of this policy to maintain support. If discontent grows, it could impact the administration's broader legislative agenda and influence future elections. 6. Potential for new trade agreements. Amid heightened tensions, there may also be opportunities for new trade agreements as countries seek to negotiate more favorable terms amidst the tariff landscape. The U.S. could leverage these tariffs as a bargaining chip to negotiate trade deals that align more closely with its interests. However, the success of such negotiations will depend on the willingness of other countries to engage in discussions while facing the pressure of retaliatory tariffs. 7. Long-term economic realignment. Over the long term, the U.S. economy may undergo a realignment as businesses adapt to new trade realities. This could lead to a re-evaluation of traditional trade partnerships with countries seeking alternative markets and suppliers. The focus on national security and self-sufficiency may also drive changes in policy, leading to a rethinking of globalization trends that have characterized the past few decades. Conclusion. In conclusion, Trump's reciprocal tariff plan is a significant shift in U.S. trade policy that will likely produce a range of economic and geopolitical effects. While the administration aims to restore fairness in trade and bolster American manufacturing, the realities of inflation, retaliatory actions, and potential shifts in public sentiment present considerable challenges. As businesses and governments navigate this complex landscape, the long-term implications of these tariffs will shape the future of U.S. trade relations and the broader global economy. The outcomes remain uncertain, but the potential for trade wars and economic strain looms large as both allies and rivals respond to this aggressive policy shift.